It is officially June, which means that it is Jurassic June, which means let's talk about some Jurassic Park video games, starting with Jurassic Park for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, before we get started, we are only going to cover the Jurassic Park games that were made between 1993 and 1995. So we're not going to cover the Lost World Jurassic Park or the Jurassic Park 3 or the Jurassic World era. We're just focusing on the original Jurassic Park games. So let's dive right in. Jurassic Park for the NES was released in 1993, shortly after the release of the film in theaters, and it actually was a pretty decent game, being a top-down view. And, basically the goal of the game was completing missions, collecting dinosaur eggs, and, that was pretty much the game. Was it a fun game? I would say it was pretty fun. I've played it. I've actually played it several times, and I have to say, I totally enjoy it. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I'd give it about an 8.5. One of those eggs got trampled, so we're going to give, half a cracked egg there, so 8.5. And of course, let's not forget the Game Boy port of the game, which is pretty much identical to the NES version. And, it's the same top-down view. The levels are laid out pretty similar to the Nintendo Entertainment System counterpart, but just because it's a Game Boy version doesn't mean that it's a bad game, but it's not as good as the Nintendo Entertainment System version. So on a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give it about a 7. Next up is Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This game is basically, it's an upscaled version of the NES version. It's in stereo, if that makes any difference, which I don't know if it really would or not. Of course, being a kid in the 90s, we didn't care if it was in stereo or not, unless it was our music. But basically, it's similar. You have the same top-down view. You go around zapping compies and, velociraptors and all of the traditional creatures. Of course, you have to complete missions and whatnot. And the interesting thing is that there's actually a first-person view. Whenever you go inside the compound, you see this first-person view in which you shoot velociraptors and dilophosaurus. And, it's, I guess you could say, similar to Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, but it's actually a pretty interesting and fun experience. Well, before I give this a rating, I have to say that it has one disadvantage. It does not have a save battery because this game is pretty long and you have to play it in a single sitting. It did have some advantages though, such as it taking advantage of the Super FX chip and the Mode 7 built into Super Nintendo consoles of the day. Taking the advantages and disadvantages into account, it's not a bad game, and on a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give it about a 7. Next up is Jurassic Park for the Sega Genesis. In this game, you basically try to survive Jurassic Park, make it through several levels, and bada bing, bada boom, that's the end. It's one of those games you can beat in a single sitting. You don't have to, unlike the Super Nintendo and NES version, spend hours trying to beat it. And the awesome part about it is that you can play either as Alan Grant or a Velociraptor. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this a perfect 10. It is just the perfect Jurassic Park game, and that's my honest opinion of it. Next up is Jurassic Park for the Sega Game Gear. Basically, it's kind of similar to the Sega Genesis version. You basically go through levels and try to escape Jurassic Park. And to be honest, the graphics in this game for a handheld system are pretty spot on, comparable to, Nintendo Entertainment System, Sega Master System graphics. And honestly, For a handheld title, it's pretty fun. It's actually, I found it to be more fun than the Game Boy version. And I could definitely see myself coming back to this game at some point. It's fast to play through. You don't have to spend a whole entire hours playing it. Or I should say at least a whole day trying to play it. But if you want to spend an afternoon playing this, I highly recommend it, just like with the Sega Genesis version. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this a 9.0. It is definitely fun, and it's great. Sega was at the top of their game, and I highly recommend this one. Next up is Jurassic Park for Sega CD, and this game was vastly different from the other Jurassic Park games. And that's because it's a point-and-click adventure. Basically, it takes place after Jurassic Park. I guess you could say either the movie or the Sega Genesis game if you want to go that far back. It does have some hints of the novel involved when you really get into the game and think about it. Of course, some of these Jurassic Park games take some liberties, but it's for a point-and-click adventure, it's not bad. Oh, I'm getting off track again. Basically, your mission is to go back to Jurassic Park after the events and collect dinosaur eggs while trying to get off the island alive. Point-and-click games at the time were extremely popular, and for Sega CD especially, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing a point-and-click adventure. And of course, like most point-and-click adventures, this one was action-oriented, and it had full animation in it, which was definitely a fun experience. But for some people don't really care much for point-and-click adventures. It depends on if it's your cup of tea or not. I remember playing this game. Of course, as a Jurassic Park fan, I loved everything Jurassic. And on a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I would give this, I'd give it about a 7. It's not really bad, it's not perfect, but if you want to spend some time playing it, I definitely recommend trying it out, especially if you love point-and-click adventures. Next up is Jurassic Park for PC, MS-DOS and Amiga. Now we're back to the top-down view. The game had a really good soundtrack for the PC version, and basically it follows a similar premise. You basically have to escape Jurassic Park alive while completing levels and missions, and it's not a bad game. I remember playing it for MS-DOS. It looked pretty amazing for the time. For some people, it's not their cup of tea. It's not as enjoyable. I at least found it not as enjoyable as the Super Nintendo or original Nintendo version of the game. But of course, that's what's unique about these Jurassic Park games, is that none of the games for each system are the same, and each one is unique in their own way. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 5. It's not really too great. I mean, it's made by Ocean. Of course, Ocean worked on some of the other games. The PC version just wasn't for me. It may be for you, but if you want to give it a try, bully for you. Yeah, I give it a 5 dinosaur eggs out of 10. Now let's talk about Jurassic Park Interactive for the 3DO. If you don't know what the 3DO is, please do me a favor and Google it, or at least go to Wikipedia, please. The 3DO was a game system. It was a very short-lived game system. It was on the market for roughly 3.5 years, I believe. I didn't own one, but a friend I grew up with owned one, and one of the games he had was Jurassic Park Interactive. So let's discuss this for a moment. Basically, the game is you navigate a map and you play a bunch of mini games, and there's also some full motion video. And the thing about the full motion video is that it doesn't actually include the actors from the movie. You get some look-alike actors, if you can call them look-alike actors, because some of them who portray the characters look nothing like their movie counterpart, and I guess it's because they couldn't afford to rehire the original actors to actually be in this game. So it's just it's a mess. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it was a good idea, and the game looks good. It looks really good, especially the animation in it and the full motion video for parts. I guess you could say for the full motion video. But it was a really smooth game, other than it being nothing but mini games. So on a scale from 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one I give it a 3. It is it's not extremely terrible. It's terrible, but it's one of those games that, it should have been a multiplayer game, but it's not. It's a single player game. If it was multiplayer, it could have been one of the first actual party games that existed. But for some reason, they just didn't do that. And the mini games, some of them are pretty terrible and slow paced. So I give this one 3 dinosaur eggs out of 10. Well, we're almost there. This is Jurassic Park Part 2, The Chaos Continues for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Released in 1995, they chose to go with, a layout of the game of sorts, I guess you could say, that was similar to the Sega Genesis version of Jurassic Park and its sequel, which we will be discussing in just a few moments. You get a pretty impressive cutscene at the beginning with little voiceover work, which was rare for a Super Nintendo game at the time, and it impressed me as a child. And like I said, it basically was a side-scroller similar to Jurassic Park for Sega Genesis, and basically the goal of the game was you have to fight Biosyn, and you go up against soldiers, and you're trying to protect dinosaurs and complete levels and escape the island. That's pretty much it. You get penalized if you shoot certain dinosaurs, but you don't get penalized if you shoot at raptors or Tyrannosaurus Rex and some of the other ones. But it's a pretty decent game, I'm not gonna lie. I found it to be pretty fun. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give this one a 9. It's pretty fun, and I think you'll enjoy it. All you have to do is sit through it, of course, which it could take you a few hours, but it's a pretty decent game, and I think you'll love it. And of course, it had a Game Boy version, but the Game Boy version of Jurassic Park Part 2, The Chaos Continues, is vastly different. Unlike the Super Nintendo version, Biosyn is not in this game. Instead, you play as Dr. Grant as you attempt to escape the island, basically similar to the regular Jurassic Park games. You complete several missions and fight bosses and attempt to escape the island, and, it's a side-scroller. That's pretty much the game. I give this one, on a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I give it about a 7. I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you want a good game to play in an afternoon. I would definitely recommend this one, and there's not much more I can say about it. Next up is Jurassic Park Rampage Edition for the Sega Genesis. This game I absolutely loved, especially when you got to that menu screen, not menu screen, but your start screen, and you seen the animation of the drool and the blood dripping from the raptor's teeth. That was, as a child, that just was like hardcore awesome. And basically it plays like the first game for Sega Genesis, Jurassic Park. You can play as Alan Grant or a raptor, and basically it's the same thing. You have to attempt to escape the island, and some of the levels were inspired by the novel, which eventually made it into the other films, such as The Aviary, which you can see here. That was in the novel, but it wasn't featured in any of the films until Jurassic Park 3, and I think that was awesome. And I just absolutely love this game. It's like right up there in my top 10 favorite games of all time. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, this gets a perfect 10. It is just, absolutely amazing. I highly recommend it. You got to play this at least once. You can play it in a single afternoon. Doesn't take very long. You'll love it, trust me. And last but not least, Jurassic Park 4, the arcade. This was one of my favorite games. Me and my cousin, I remember playing this at Chuck E. Cheese back in the day, and we would just pump this thing full of quarters and just play it. It's a little bit more challenging to play by yourself, especially if you're trying to hold on to your tokens at the same time, especially when the seat is moving around and everything. And I had an incident where I was trying to play it, and it just I set my tokens in the seat next to it, and it started moving, and tokens flew everywhere. I had them in a little cup. Memories. Anyway, back to discussing this arcade game. Basically, you return to Jurassic Park, and you're not really shooting the dinosaurs, you're tranquilizing them, which, that as many tranquilizer darts as you're pumping into that T-Rex, he should not be alive. This was a really popular game at Chuck E. Cheese's. My local Chuck E. Cheese, I believe, still has this. I haven't been there in a few years. I wouldn't be surprised if they still have it, because it's just an absolute favorite among children. And especially, I love this game. It's one of my favorites. And it's amazing. I know I've said that so many times, but basically, it was the perfect arcade game. I mean, it had everything that a kid wanted. And it was just that awesome. On a scale of 1 to 10 dinosaur eggs, I gotta give it a 10. Sega knew what they were doing when they got a hold of these Jurassic Park games. I mean, they did a lot better job than Nintendo could ever do. And, I mean, at least for the first few years that Jurassic Park games existed. And this game is just the perfect arcade game. It's got everything you want. It's got moving around. It's got shooting. It's got, all of that. And if you find one of these, you got to play them. Go to your local Chuck E. Cheese right now. I don't care if you're an adult. Just go and play it, and just hog the machine. So all the kids are like, I want to go now, and you're like, no, I'm reliving memories. You got to play this if you haven't. If you got a wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever, your best friend, your dog, if he could play games, bring him. You got to play this game. It's amazing. Just simply amazing. I don't know how many times I've said that, but if you love the game as much as I do, you understand. And with that was all of the Jurassic Park games. At least I believe that was all of them that was released when the movie first came out, the first few years. We will eventually do another video on the ones that were released around the time of the Lost World Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 3, and we'll eventually do one covering the Jurassic World games, and some of the other ones, but you understand. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. We are going to do more Jurassic Park and related video game videos, and we're also going to do one. It's kind of, it'll be coming soon. It's kind of video game related. It will cover the old website JP Legacy, which not only covered the movies and the novel, but the novels, I should say, but it also covered the video games. And fun fact, the Telltale Jurassic Park game actually used JP Legacy and their encyclopedia for reference material. So that's how it's video game related. But we'll talk about that in a future episode. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell if you want notifications. And until next time, I'll see you.